Hey everyone, Livy here, back with another video, and today I'm going to do a very fun VR called Tarot Collection Top Decks. This is basically, you're going to see down below, there's 21 questions. Each of these is supposed to go to tarot decks in your collection that you think are the best of a specific thing. I mean, okay, I have to say, and by the way, this is the VR to 78 Puertas. I will say, I think the name of this tag is a little misleading because if I had to say that all the decks I'm going to feature are like my favorites, like I think are my best decks, like that I personally like to use, some of these answers would be a little different. So I kind of just answered the prompts. We'll see what we see. We get what we get here. But yeah, let's kind of get into it. So question number 1 of this VR, this tag is, what was your very first tarot deck ever? And I have to say that in showing the deck I'm going to show, it's actually also going to answer question number 8, 10, and 19. So I'm getting all 3 of those out of the way now. I know I'm cheating probably because I'm assuming it wanted you to do like every single deck of a different thing, but it would be redundant, okay? This is the deck that answers all of those questions. So question number 1, right, is what was your very first tarot deck? 8 asks which is your most worn out tarot deck. 10 is what tarot deck is the best one for shadow work. And 19 is what tarot deck do you always use for self-reading? So to answer all those questions, we have, this is going to surprise literally nobody, this is the Raven's Prophecy Tarot, right? I have edged mine in this orange, but yes, this answers every single one of those questions. The Raven's Prophecy Tarot was my first ever tarot deck. It is also my most worn out tarot deck. The tarot deck, I guess I would use for shadow work because I use it for a lot of very personal readings, which is question 19. So this is the deck. You guys have seen this deck so many times on my channel. Do I really need to show that much of it? Probably not. I mean, if you've been here a while, you know. This is my oldest deck. You guys can see I've used this deck so much that the cards have literally warped. The edges are scratched up, beat up to hell. That is why I edged it. This deck I've just used for all those things. So I feel like I'm just not going to talk about this one this long just because, I've already talked about it on my channel a lot, okay? Why it was my first, why it's so worn out and all that stuff. I feel like you for that, you guys just need to watch my other videos. But yeah, that's the Raven's Prophecy Tarot. It answers all those questions, and we are going to move on now. So question number 2 is, which is your most recent tarot deck? And for that, I'm going to pull out this one. This is my Asphodelen Mythos Tarot. This is my most recent tarot deck. At the time of you guys watching this, I will probably have had a couple VRs and stuff talking about this. I probably would have released the walkthrough that I filmed of this, but, oh, and these are the backs, gilding. This deck is beautiful. I really like this one. This could have been, I guess, for a lot of things, but this deck is still kind of new in my collection for me to say that, but yeah. This deck, as you can see, is beautiful. It is based on Greek mythology. I think it does an excellent job, by the way, of showcasing Greek mythology. There were only a couple cards in this deck that, looking at it, I'd be like, that wasn't my first choice, but it still works, So this deck is pretty damn perfect. I have already said this is pretty much the only Greek mythology deck now I'm ever going to need. It scratches that itch. The artwork is fantastic. Everything with this deck was very intentional. I believe, in my heart of hearts, very intentional. Very good deck. Artwork, again, is stunning. This is an indie deck with, I think the creator is located in Washington, so do with that as you will about how you would want this deck to get to you if you are interested in this deck. But yeah, I think it is fantastic. And I'm so glad that I have gotten it. So yeah, that's the Asphodel and Mythos. I have this new cloth. As you can see, it still has all its lines. But I just wanted to use it today. So there we go. Anyways, that is that of that. Next deck here. Question number 3 is, which tarot deck has the best colors? Now, this is kind of biased, and there are a couple of tarot decks I could have shown instead. But I personally cannot get over the colors of this deck. The deck in question here being the Spark and Pen Tarot. And you're going to see, I think that this is my best deck when it comes to color usage, because first off, look at the backs. Okay? Right off the bat, backs. Great. This is also one of my best cardstock decks, but I have a different deck for that, I guess. But this is one of them that has the best. But let me just go like this, so you can see for yourself why this is a deck with the best colors. Because it literally has every color of the rainbow featured. This deck is fantastic. It is different, I will say, than what I would normally go for, in the sense that the people featured in this deck, most of them, except this person, I guess, who's all shrouded, most of the people featured in this deck for some reason don't have clothes. I don't know why they don't have clothes on. That's usually something I'm not a fan of, but the colors in this deck are so fantastic. It's done in a really cute style that's very still direct to the point. I understand it, that I kind of don't care that they're like mostly nude. So yeah, I don't know. The colors of this are just to die for. So I'm here for it. Great use of colors. And yeah, so this one is my favorite for that reason, you know. I mean, there was a couple of other decks I considered that are very bright and colorful that I also like. I also, honorable mention, I guess, goes to the Queer Tarot, the recent deck I got. And that one also has fantastic colors, but I feel like that one would eye burn people more. So yeah, is what it is. So Spark and Pen Tarot, best in color. Now, what tarot deck has the best faces? This was kind of hard. I don't know if this is even the right choice, but I do find their faces really good. And the deck in question, made in this little Krista Chronicles bag here, is the Darkwood Tarot. I have the mini, and I've already talked about why, which is basically, the shorthand version is, I hate Llewellyn. I hate more recent Llewellyn deck cardstock. I need to specify that, because my first edition of, I call it the first edition. I guess it's more the first printing. I have a first printing of the Raven's Prophecy Tarot, and then my Shadowscapes Tarot. Both have actually decent Llewellyn cardstock. The rest I've ever seen of Llewellyn are god-awful. But their minis have great cardstock. So this is incredibly tiny. I guess to see this stuff, how am I going to do this? How about I zoom in, guys, temporarily? So don't get mad at me, okay? I'm just going to, there we go. Now you guys can see here. Okay, this deck, I think, has the best faces, because look at their expressions. They are so expressive. Well, maybe not the eagle, but like, so expressive of faces. I really like the way that they're drawn. I've talked about this before, I don't like decks with a lot of people in them, but I do have to say I like the way these people are depicted and drawn. Some of them have really good like facial features that just go with what the card is. Like, for instance, this is a King of Swords. That's a pretty good King of Swords face. Even this King of Cups face, you know, it's just, I don't know what it is about this deck and their faces. I like them. So for me, I guess they work. Another one that would have been pretty good, I do like the faces, is the Eldritch Overload, but you're going to see that deck in a different spot in this VR. So I guess, yeah, I'm not going to go too into it. But yeah, that's the Darkwood Tarot. I think it's best in faces. And I am going to fix us, so let me zoom. Let me zoom out again. Okay, we're back to where we normally are. Question number, let me look at this correctly. Question number 5 is, which is your largest tarot deck? Oh God. Okay. This shouldn't surprise anyone who's been on my channel a little bit. I've talked about this a few times. My largest tarot deck by far is this one. This is the Lioness Oracle Tarot. And this thing is chunky. This is a big boy. This deck is massive. First off, I have really tiny hands. So you can see that I'm like struggling and I'm like straining to hold on to this deck. It's also just fat. Okay. And it's wide. This is beyond, I don't even know if this is technically oracle size. It feels somehow like it's bigger than that. See, I'm even struggling just to like figure out a way to hold this to show you guys. But this, oh, I love this Two of Swords card. But anyways, this deck is by far my largest tarot deck. I knew it was going to be big, and that's kind of what, like, for the longest time, I kind of avoided getting it, was because of that. I have small hands. It's just like, it's just not comfortable to have to strain myself just to use this deck, you know? I probably would use this deck more if it was smaller. This is definitely one of those decks I like using, but when I use it most of the time, it also just isn't for big readings. I probably pull like 3 cards at most, or sometimes do a week ahead spread with it, but even then it takes up like half the damn table. So yeah, this is just big. This is just like not what I normally like to work with. I prefer decks that are either smaller in size or are at least standard tarot size or Lo Scarabeo tarot size. This is just not comfortable for me. But yeah, the Lioness Oracle Tarot is by far my largest tarot deck. Okay, now that I've shown the largest, question number 6 is, which is your smallest tarot deck? And technically I have 2 others that are also in the small size, but I'm not going to be redundant with them. So let me show you this. This is my smallest tarot deck by far. This is the Exile Tarot. This is the Awaken edition. I also have the little silent edition of this deck. And then, of course, the Monsoon Tarot by the same creator also has this really tiny size. These are the backs. This is, as you can see, I have really small hands, and it is very tiny. Like, it is even tinier than the Darkwood. And you want to know how I know that? Because if I put these 2 up together, guess what? It is smaller. Right? Like, that's how I know. But let me zoom in again. Sorry. I feel like I'm zooming in all over the place. But the Exile Tarot, this deck is beautiful. Again, I backed this on Kickstarter. So when I backed it on Kickstarter, for some reason, it did not give me the option to just get 1 version of this deck. No, I had to get 2. And so the cheapest way to get 2 decks was literally just to buy the minis again. And I don't mind that, though. I think these minis, this really tiny size, is honestly the best size for when you're traveling and going around the town. Honestly, this is like the best small tarot deck. And also because this size is really good for basically anywhere you're at. If you need to do a reading and you barely have any table space or your goddamn lap, you just have your lap, this will literally fit cards on your lap. It is so tiny. So the Exile Tarot is my smallest. And boy, do I love it. It's so cute. Okay. So Exile Tarot is my smallest tarot deck. I mean, it's in that 3-way tie, but once again, I was just going to show 1. So give me 1 second. Okay, back. Question number 7 of this VR is, what tarot deck has the best court cards? And Oh man, I did not expect this this one to be, but it is, and let me explain. Okay, this is the Disney Villains Tarot deck. Wow. Yeah, this deck actually does have the best court cards. Okay, so this is the little guidebook. These are the backs. And this deck has the best court cards because it is surprising how accurate those that are shown are. Let me try to find one. Just to give you an example here. Okay. Cinderella's evil stepmother is the Queen of Swords. Perfect. Ursula, Queen of Cups. Perfect. Freaking Cinderella's evil, not Cinderella, Snow White's mother. I think it was actually her mother, right? Not her stepmother. Perfect, though. It's very dark. Queen of Coins, very perfect. King. Like, just look at these. Literally perfect depictions. And listen, you can argue this, but this deck is really interesting. The Disney Villains Tarot, in my opinion, likes to take the cards to the darker side. Definitely the more shadow side. But I think this is the best depiction of the court cards because it shows them how this personality of a court card, how it could be taken to the extreme. Like the Knight of Cups being Gaston, right? It's perfect. But it's like, it's the bad side, you know, like the darker side of that knight, right? It's, if you're too much of a romantic, too much, you know, too full of yourself, too in your emotions in that way, you just end up being a big dickhead. Like, it's not, you can argue however you want, but yeah, I think these are honestly the best courts. I think they're all in order because I was using this deck for the, my court card series 2, and that's when I discovered that this deck had the best because I kept picking these as the best representations. So honestly, Disney Villains Tarot, if you need a deck where you're trying to understand the court cards, especially taken to the like shadowy, darker side of it, this is your deck. So yeah, just so you know. Okay. Question number 9, because I already answered question number 8. Question number 9 is, which is your most esoteric tarot deck? And to be honest with you, I don't really have a lot of esoteric, as it were, decks. But I guess if I had to really think about which one's the most esoteric, it would be probably some rendition of the RWS. So this is mine that I have. This is the Modern Hue Tarot. This one, it has these backs. I edged it in the same color as these backs, so very good color match, I have to say. This is actually probably one of the best edging I've done. It was just so perfectly matched. I could not believe that I was able to achieve that look. But anyways, that's not what we're here for. This is what we're here for. This is the RWS. As you can see, it is just watercolor renditions, right? Just watercolor. But it's the RWS, Golden Dawn, whatever. I guess this is my most esoteric. I don't know, guys. Again, I don't really go that way when it comes to tarot. I think a lot of mine are like in the future or like different in just the way that they are presented. So this edition would be my most esoteric copy. So yeah, everyone's seen the RWS. This one's just a different way of presenting itself. But yeah, this is for sure my most esoteric tarot deck. Okay, question number 11, because I already answered 10, is what tarot deck has the best back design? And this was really hard too. I would say there's a lot of other decks I also extremely love the backs of, but there's a reason why I picked this one. So this is the Eldritch Overload Tarot. I think this back is by far one of the best, if not the best, in my collection for a lot of reasons. First off, let's look at it. Holographic foiling, okay? Holographic, the best. Also, the design of this is phenomenal, okay? Because look at it. It is perfectly reversible. This is a Mind Flayer, okay? That's been like cybernetically looked at, but this is part of the Mind Flayer. You have the word Eldritch Overload even in the title, and it doesn't look ugly, by the way. That's another big thing. I don't like titles usually in my decks, but it's like, it hides very well, as you can see, going like this, hides pretty well. But this is Mind Flayer, part of it. And then you flip it over. Guess what? Still the same Mind Flayer and still says Eldritch Overload perfectly. I don't know how the hell they achieved this, but this is fantastic. Fantastic backs. Like, full stop. These are beautiful. This is probably the best. Just in the sense of design and like colors and everything. This is so good. I do have a lot of great tarot deck backs in my collection, but this one is very, very hard to beat personally. Okay, this next prompt was also kind of hard for me. Question number 12 says, which tarot deck or what tarot deck has the best card stock? And there's a couple that could have gone in this place too, but I'm going to show those decks in different positions. So I guess my best tarot deck cardstock has to be this one by far. This is the Anima Mundi Tarot. And every time I think of a deck with good cardstock, this deck comes to my brain. So it had to be this one. It has gilding, as you can see. These are the backs. And what makes this cardstock so good, in my opinion, is this is it's just like a very nicely done linen finish, okay? You guys can probably, oh, there we go. If in the light, you can see it's like that waffle texture linen, but it's matte, okay? That's very important here too. It's matte. And despite having gilding, it actually has a decent like bend. I don't know if people riffle shuffle though this deck, but I just think it has a good flexibility. But at the same time, this deck doesn't really like bend at all. Like I've had this deck, this is one of my oldest tarot decks too. And it's pretty much not really bent, like at all. I don't know how the hell it's been like that. But yeah, the Anima Mundi Tarot. So good. This is a deck I don't use enough of, and I honestly need to use more of it because, as you can see, it is very beautiful. It is pippish. It's animal pippish. If you don't like that kind of thing, this would probably not be the deck for you. But if more decks were in the same cardstock, wherever the hell the creator here gets her deck printed, I think it's fantastic. I just think it's really good. And if more decks were in this cardstock, I think a lot of people personally would be very, very happy. So Anima Mundi, very, very delicious, beautiful cardstock. Okay, next question. Number 13 says, what tarot deck has the best soft silky touch? And when they say soft silky touch, what they're really saying is that rose petal finish, I'm pretty sure. Otherwise, I misunderstood this question, but I'm pretty sure that's what that texture is. And to be honest, what's funny is I'm not really a fan of rose petal finish. I do have a couple of oracle decks with the finish, but this is the only tarot deck with it, so I guess I'm going to show it. This is the Wonderworld Tarot. It opens up like this. This is the first edition, which I'm not sure if it's completely out of print yet, but it might be. There is a pocket-sized edition that does not have this soft touch silky finish though. But because this is my only one with that texture, I thought I'd show it. These are the backs of the first edition. I don't know if the second edition also has this cardstock. But yeah, soft, silky, and it's very sticky. So honestly, would I say this is the best? No, but this is the only tarot deck with this cardstock. I literally have to go like this because it just gets stuck together. I'm just not, I don't know, I'm not a fan of rose petal as much. I do have some oracle decks with rose petal finish that I think are better soft silky touch in the sense that they're not as sticky as this deck. But this is the only tarot deck I have in this finish. I did learn a trick though with this, with soft silky. If you go like this and you basically keep doing that to all the corners of the deck, it temporarily gets easier to shuffle it, but it's very temporary. Otherwise, it's just like hell. And I mean, the more I've used this deck, it is a little easier to shuffle now, as you can see. But the cards still, if I'm like shoving them together, they basically are shoved together and they do not like spring apart. So yeah, this is the Wonderworld Tarot. Okay, question number, where am I now? 14 is, what tarot deck has the best sound when you shuffle it? And this was actually a hard question because I was like, oh shit, do I know a deck that has like the best sound? And I decided to pick this one. This is the Goblins and Gardens Tarot. Gilding still, glossy linen finish. But because this deck is linen, ooh, it just makes a nice, I don't know. And because it's so glossy and linen, like, it's so easy. It just flies. There's another tarot deck I'm going to show that also has a texture and also technically does the same thing. But I think this deck, as you can see, is just slightly more flexible. That this one is the slightly better sound. So the Goblins and Gardens Tarot, definitely one of my like funnest to shuffle by far. So yeah, there's that. But while I'm here, I was going to like cut out again. Maybe I'll just show it now. Question number 15 is, which of your tarot decks is the most misunderstood? And I think, I don't know, this was a hard one, but I think it's this one. This is the Paulina Tarot. This is by Paulina Faye, also known as Paulina Cassidy. Has a few decks, okay? And I think this deck is the most understood because out of all of her decks that she has, you know, made, this is a tarot deck I see the least of. I think I know only one other person on TarotTube who has this deck. What's her name? I'm blanking right now. I'm pretty sure there's at least only one or two other people I know that have this deck. Most people like this creator's Joie de Vivre Tarot, right? So they don't think, oh, let me get this one. But I think that is the wrong choice. The Paulina Tarot. This deck is actually very understated. I think it's very misunderstood. There's a lot of people who don't like this deck too, because if I zoom in like really close, as you can see, this deck has a lot of details, like a lot of details, and people who do not have as good of eyesight have said that because of that, this just feels like a lot. But I personally think this is the best one and most misunderstood because it actually works really well as a tarot deck. A lot of these cards, even though it is like technically an RWS clone, it's not at the same time. It does some interesting renditions. I think this is also the best use of color. It's darker. There's people faces in it, but there's also some animalistic figures. I just think it was a really well done deck. And this is actually her first deck. I think like after this, I don't know, people like, I think people complained about the way that this deck was. And so this creator just, you know, wasn't as fun or like different with her style after that. She got very, in my opinion, kind of boring. Like didn't include as many details, made it very simplistic to the point that it almost seemed like, to me, when I've seen them, they're like more babyish. I don't know how else to explain it. So I honestly think this is the best one. And I think it's just misunderstood. And more people should give this one a try, in my opinion. So that is the Paulina Tarot. I like it the most. And these are the backs. So yeah, Paulina Tarot. Okay, next question is number 16. Which is your most ancient tarot deck or the most historical? And I would have to say I would have to go to a Marseille deck. I don't have really old historical looking ones, so this is the best I can do. This is the Metanoa Marseille. Oh, it's got some... Oh, I forgot. This deck actually also has rose petal finish. I guess you could have said this one because this rose petal feels a little bit better than the Wonder World. But oh well, it is what it is now. But yeah, this is the Marseille style deck. And I feel like Marseille style decks are always going to, you know... What's the word here? They're always going to be the most ancient. They're literally the oldest. It's Marseille. Or I guess Tarocchi and all them too, but this is like the only Marseille style deck that I own. So yeah, this is the one I had to feature. This deck's interesting. I feel like I'm really only using this more as a study deck though. I'm just not actually the rose petal on this is really nice too. So you could have just ditched this and said this deck, I guess, has a better rose petal finish, or soft silky touch, but I'm just not as much of a fan of Marseille. I know I'm trying to study it, but right now I'm just not 100% vibing, but I love the size of this deck, I will say. It's also a very good size. So yeah, that's the Metanoa Marseille. And it is probably my most historical deck because it is Marseille. And even though it's like newer in design, it's just not, you know, it is what it is. This is what I have in my collection. Okay. Okay. Question number 17 is, which tarot deck was the most surprising for good or for bad? And I guess currently the one in my brain still is the Forager's Daughter Tarot. This tarot deck has the same pretty much cardstock as the Goblins and Gardens, except I would say this one, I don't know what it is with this one. This one's like slightly thicker feeling, so it does still have like a nice like shuffle here. And it also has very beautiful back designs. I would say this is definitely up there and one of the best like backs of decks I have. But this deck was the most surprising, not just because of how much I actually enjoyed like the cardstock and the feel of this deck, but how this deck read for me was surprisingly good. I just didn't, I mean, I like animal decks, I do, but I wasn't sure for the longest time if this deck was going to work for me, but it did. And I think it helps if you also view this deck with the guidebook, which for some reason right now I cannot find where the hell I put it, but this deck's guidebook is fantastic. It really deep dives into the intention behind this deck. Like what's the animal? Why is it drawn this way? How can you view it from this direction? How does it connect to where the creator lived? It's just very well done in my opinion. And that just surprised me. I mean, yeah, this deck is also, by the way, it is on the pricier side of a deck. It's probably not my most expensive in that way, but it probably is up there because this was like around 75 USD, if not a little bit more. But I was just surprised by how well this works for me. And it has a lot of extra cards in it too that are also, oh, sorry, there's a lot of like bugs and things in here. It has a lot of good depictions and things. I don't know. It just really worked for me. So this deck is still like really surprising me, and I do want to get back to it sometime this year. I used this in January, I believe. So it was just a really stellar surprise. But yeah, the Forager's Daughter Tarot. I'm surprised just how much I really, really like it. Okay. I'm on question number 18 now, and it says, which tarot deck has the best purchase story? And to be honest, most of my tarot deck purchase stories are very boring. I get most of my decks online. I haven't really received, I mean, I have now, like, I've like taken certain decks off of people's hands in the community now. So I guess there's that too. I paid a little bit of shipping on that, but this is the funnest, I guess, in more recent times of decks that I purchased. This is the Insecta Obscura Tarot by Faina Laura. You can find this deck on Etsy because she does have it on Etsy. But the cool thing about this for me was that I actually purchased this deck in person, which surprised me because this is an indie deck, guys. Okay, it's an indie deck. Has these beautiful matte black edges. It is square shaped. Actually has nice cardstock too, I'm not gonna lie. And this deck has the best purchase story because I was in beautiful Carmel by the Sea here in California. And I went into this random store thinking, oh, this looks cute. And it ended up having tarot decks. And this tarot deck was there. And this is actually a tarot deck I've seen around. By the way, if you don't like insects, I'm sorry. Like, please click away from this part. But this deck was there. And I was just shocked because I have looked at this artist's artwork before. Like, I've seen it on Etsy. I've been very tempted by this deck in the past. And I thought, I mean, it's here, right? This is a sign. This is the time to get this deck. And it was even funnier because my husband was like, yeah, get this deck. And he never says that. He wants me to chill out. So, you know what I mean? Like, he was just like, yeah, you haven't gotten anything nice for yourself this trip. And you should. So get this deck. And I did. And I don't regret it. This is actually a really cool deck. I'm not obsessed with bugs, but the way that these bugs are designed are in beautiful, like, surrealist kind of way that they all make so much sense. And even the little guidebook this comes with is very intentional about the bugs chosen and why. It explains it in a very succinct little bit, but it's so good. So if you do like bugs or do like the art style of this deck, I do recommend checking it out. And square decks actually are not that bad for shuffling because they are square, they're not circle, right? So they're actually pretty easy. And because I have smaller hands, it is actually a little bit better to hold on to. So yeah, this is the Insecta Obscura, and I love that I got it on vacation, that it was just it was meant to be kind of purchase. So yeah. Okay, I already answered question number 19, so I'm going to move on to 20, which is the most difficult tarot deck to be mastered? And this is kind of a hard one to think about. Like, do I have a deck that's really hard to get around? But I think this one probably would be classified under that. This is the Nemeth Tarot by Jonasa Yaus. And I think this is going to be, for not just for me, but for like other people, this would be the most difficult tarot deck to master because of the subject matter at hand. So this deck, if you don't know, is Jonasa Yaus's third tarot deck. And this deck is completely based on Galician mythology, okay? Galician, but I would also argue this is shared mythology with Portugal. So I would also argue that there's a lot of overlap, okay? There's a lot of overlap. But this is mainly supposed to be a Galician deck. And why it's the most difficult is, one, the creator does not have the guidebook done yet at the time of me filming this. Not done. It does tell you what it tells you what the card is, and also tells you the story involved. But if you don't know shit about Galician mythology, this is going to be very hard for people to understand. There are some things here that I recognize because, again, I would say there's a lot of this deck that at least has a 40, if not more, % overlap with Portuguese mythology. So I recognize some of this, but I'm not even 100% familiar with all of it. Like, I only know a very general knowledge. And on top of that, besides the fact that this is also based on Galician mythology, this deck, like most of Jonasa Yaus's decks, this is also a Marseille style deck. So for me, that's still also more difficult, is like to wrap my head around, is not only am I trying to understand the story involved, I have to understand how this fits into a bigger numerology thing. And so for me, this is the most difficult. And I think this would be for even people who don't have any grasp at all. You are not going to understand this. Not at first glance, unless you are also Galician, which then for you, then this will be probably easier to pick up. But if you're not, and I feel like a lot of people in the tarot community are not, this would be a very difficult one. But it's beautiful. it's just not, I would not at all recommend this as a beginner deck at all, because it would take you some time and then you would be very disappointed and you just want to get into reading with it, right? Like, I don't even know yet how I would read with this deck, so it's a lot to consider. But yeah, this is a Nemeth Tarot. And finally, I'm just going to get straight into it. Last question on this prompt, question number 21, is what tarot deck is the best overall? And listen, there's a couple of decks I could have put in this place instead, okay? This is a very subjective question. What is the best overall? How the hell can you come up with that claim? Like, there's so many tarot decks in my collection that I love. There's some I could even argue that I love more than the tarot deck I'm going to show you. But I decided that this is the best tarot deck overall when you consider a couple of key, very important points. So the deck in question is Tarot of the Divine. Yes, I know. You might be thinking, what the fuck? This mass market deck, you think, is the best overall. And it's because of a few factors of why I decided to go with this one. First and foremost, color-wise, this does pretty well. Diverse-wise, top tier diversity, because this takes different mythologies, fairy tales, folklore from around the world and puts it into a tarot deck. And not only that, but the figures in this deck are drawn beautifully. They are drawn with intention. It also has a lot that you can do with it. Also, because it is mass market, right? That means this deck is extremely accessible. So that means that other people could also get their hands on this deck if they wanted it. A lot of the decks that I showed today, let's be honest here, they were, what's the word? They were independently produced, okay? They're indie decks. And I love indie decks. But that means that they're harder for other people to get their hands on and also have a bigger price tag. This price tag is not bad at all for this deck. You can literally go into your local Barnes & Noble or I guess if you're in Canada, what's it called? Indigo. And you'd probably find this deck there, okay? So that's another reason why I would say it's the best overall, because this deck is easily accessible. It's diverse. Cardstock, debatable. It is kind of bendy, so I don't know if I would say this is like the best cardstock out of them, but it's pretty flexible at the same time. And another thing that makes it the best overall is that it has a lot that can go with it. When you first get the deck by itself, yes, okay, the guidebook is just this. And if you just saw this, you would be kind of disappointed. But this deck has taken off so much that it also has this, which is Beneath the Moon. And this basically tells you all the stories that are in this deck, okay? And when they tells it to you, it at least gives you this much information, which is kind of a lot for all this. Like, this creator would have had to research a lot of this stuff to get all of this. So that right there also makes it good, because you have a lot that you can study. There's a lot you can build off of. And I don't have it because I don't really need it, but I even know that now this deck also even has its own tarot journal. So if you were going to learn this deck, you would have a journal right there for you to learn with this deck. So that also makes it the best, because again, it's all about accessibility, because this is also, I would argue, beginner friendly. It is beginner friendly because all these stories from around the world and like what it mentions follows pretty closely to the RWS. And it also just has like a lot of great depictions of some of these cards that is very easy to understand. Like the fact that, for instance, like the 8 of Coins being about mastery and all these that she has to build, like the 7 swans, right? There's the Magician being Cinderella's fairy godmother, right? Like a lot of these stories make a lot of sense. Even Ra, right? Being the sun, like the moon being this tale from, I'm pretty sure it's from Japan, right? It's like Fenrir as the 4 of Swords. Like this works. And And in that way, because it's so, again, accessible, anybody can pick up this deck and get into it. So for that reason, I would say this is the best overall. Now, is this my favorite deck? No. Would I argue that maybe some other decks have closer to like RWS original that would make it a little bit better for beginners? Maybe. But again, this deck is also diverse. This deck in points and time is also queer. It's just, it's nice. And I think for those reasons, that makes it the best overall, because literally anybody could get their hands on this deck and start off their tarot journey in a pretty good place. So for that reason, that is why I'm deeming it best overall. But there are a couple of tarot decks in my collection that I could have put here instead. I'm not going to lie. I might just have to do a video of my absolute favorites and just call it a day to let you know that way. But yeah, wow. Okay. That's all I have today. I felt like I was doing a marathon of talking, but thank you so much for watching. If you have stuck around this long, and yeah, I will see you guys all again next time. Bye.